Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by telling you something nobody likes to admit out loud. You're not supposed to feel good when you start changing your life. It's not supposed to feel easy, comfortable, or natural. In fact, it's supposed to feel like hell, because that's what rewiring a brain feels like. That's what breaking decades of conditioning feels like. And that's exactly why most people quit. They think the pain is a signal to stop, when in reality, it's the signal that you're finally doing something right. You've been lied to about comfort. Society has built a trap, a sweet, padded, dopamine-filled prison, and you call it normal life. You scroll when you're tired, you snack when you're bored, you rest before you've earned it, and you convince yourself that taking it easy is self-care. But the truth, it's self-sabotage dressed in a soft blanket. I've spent years studying how the human brain reacts to discomfort. The prefrontal cortex, that's the part responsible for discipline, focus, long-term planning. It lights up like a Christmas tree when you decide to push through something difficult. But here's the catch. The brain doesn't like to burn energy. It's a lazy organ. It's wired for survival, not greatness. So when you start doing something hard, waking up early, starting a business, hitting the gym, learning a skill, your brain screams, stop. Not because you're in danger, but because it's burning more glucose than it's used to. You're fighting your biology. That's why it's hard. That's why most never make it. You know, it's funny. Everyone wants a mindset shift, but nobody wants the shock that comes with it. Changing how you think is like pulling a tooth from your soul. You've got neural pathways, habits, emotional reactions, identity loops, carved into your brain from years of repetition. They're deep grooves. When you decide to change, you're literally carving new ones. That's why it hurts. That's why you feel resistance. That's why you wake up and think, maybe tomorrow. But tomorrow turns into next week, next month, next year, and suddenly, you've built an empire of excuses instead of results. Let me give you a picture. Imagine you're standing at the base of a mountain, looking up at the peak. Everyone says, you can do it. You take a few steps, and the incline hits your legs. You feel the burn. Your lungs tighten. Your body screams, this is too much. You look around, and you realize the people who started with you, they're sitting on the ground, already out of breath. They said it was too steep. That's life. Most people quit 5 minutes after starting the climb because they never built the mental muscle to keep going. Here's what's even crazier. The pain of growth and the pain of regret feel the same in the moment, but one transforms you, the other destroys you. The difference, one is temporary, the other lasts a lifetime. You see, the brain is an adaptive machine. It's plastic. It molds to your environment and your habits. Neuroscientists call it neuroplasticity. It means your thoughts, your behaviors, your identity are not fixed. You can rewire them. But rewiring doesn't happen with inspiration, it happens with repetition. You don't think your way into discipline. You act your way into it. And when you act long enough, your brain starts to believe you. When I coach people, they always say, I'm waiting to feel ready. That's your primitive brain talking. The limbic system, the emotional control center that still thinks you're running from lions. It doesn't want change. It wants predictability. It would rather live in a miserable routine than risk the unknown. That's why the average person chooses a job. They hate overbuilding a life they love because misery is familiar. Growth is not. Let's go deeper. Let's talk about dopamine, the chemical that drives human behavior. You've been hijacked by it. Every time you open your phone, every scroll, every like, every short burst of entertainment, your brain gets a hit. That's not pleasure, that's training. You're training your brain to expect instant gratification. And then you wonder why you can't stay consistent in the gym, why you can't focus for more than 5 minutes, why you quit every time it gets hard. You've conditioned yourself to chase quick hits instead of long-term wins. Real success requires dopamine discipline. It's not about eliminating pleasure. It's about retraining your brain to find pleasure in progress, not in distraction. You have to teach your mind that the real reward is the process, not the comfort. But let me be brutally honest, most people won't do it. They'll nod, clap, maybe even cry in this room, and then go home and fall back into their comfort cocoon. Why? Because they don't believe they can change. They've repeated failure so many times it's become an identity. And the human brain would rather be right about being weak than risk proving itself wrong by becoming strong. That's the sickness of modern mindset. People cling to their limitations like life jackets. I'm not confident. I'm not disciplined. I'm not consistent. You're none of those things because you keep saying it. Every time you repeat those words, you're firing the same neural pattern. You're strengthening the very circuit that keeps you small. The science is simple neurons that fire together, wire together. So stop wiring yourself for weakness. You want to know what separates the winners from the rest? It's not talent. It's not intelligence. It's not luck. It's tolerance for struggle. That's it. The ability to endure the boring, painful, thankless process while everyone else is looking for shortcuts. The people you admire, the athletes, the entrepreneurs, the innovators, they're not superhuman. They just learn to make peace with the pain of progress. I remember working with a young entrepreneur who built a startup that failed 3 times. Each time, investors pulled out, friends left, his family doubted him. Most would have stopped there. But he didn't. He said something I'll never forget. If it's this hard, it must be worth it. That line changed his life. On his 4th try, he built a company that sold for 8 figures. And you know what he told me? It never got easier. I just got stronger. That's the truth people don't want to hear. The journey doesn't get easier. You evolve. The mountain stays the same. Your legs get tougher, your lungs expand, your mind sharpens. The weight never changes. You change. But if you never push through that initial resistance, you'll never see that transformation. The first stage of any growth, whether it's building muscle, learning a language, or breaking an addiction, always triggers the most discomfort. That's your nervous system reorganizing itself. It's like tearing down an old building to construct a new one. Chaos before order, confusion before clarity, pain before peace. Now here's where most people sabotage themselves. The moment they feel discomfort, they interpret it as failure. I'm tired, so I must not be good at this. I feel anxious, so this must not be my path. Wrong. Those emotions are not stop signs. They're signals that your brain is adapting. It's literally growing new synaptic connections. The discomfort you feel is neuroplasticity in action. You can't meditate your way out of resistance. You can't journal your way around the grind. You have to go through it, physically, mentally, emotionally, until your brain rewires to the new normal. That's how discipline is born. Let me paint you another picture. Picture a blacksmith forging a sword. He heats the metal, pounds it, folds it, beats it again. That's not cruelty, that's creation. That's how the steel gains its strength. The heat doesn't destroy it, it defines it. You are that steel. Life is the forge. The blows you take aren't punishment. They're refinement. Most people never become sharp because they never stay in the fire long enough. They jump out at the first spark, and then they wonder why life feels dull, why nothing cuts deep, why everything feels meaningless. Because they never let the fire shape them. So when you start something and it feels unbearable, when you're exhausted, when your mind says, quit, understand this. That's the threshold of transformation. That's the wall separating the ordinary from the extraordinary. Every person who ever achieved greatness has stood there, staring at that wall, and heard the same voice in their head saying, you can't do this? The only difference is they didn't listen. Your comfort zone isn't just a mindset, it's a chemical addiction. You've been rewarded by your brain for staying safe. The moment you break that pattern, your body throws a tantrum. You'll feel fear, doubt, anxiety, maybe even physical fatigue. That's withdrawal. You're detoxing from comfort. And like any detox, it's ugly before it's clean. But if you push through, if you stay the course long enough, your brain adjusts. The neural pathways that once screamed danger start firing with confidence. That's when people call you disciplined, focused, driven. But those are not traits, they're trained states. You train your mind to obey you instead of control you. That's mastery. Let me share something deeply scientific. When you stick to a difficult behavior consistently for 60 to 90 days, your brain starts producing more myelin around the neurons associated with that behavior. Myelin acts like insulation. It makes the electrical signal travel faster and more efficiently. In other words, the thing that once felt hard becomes automatic. That's how habits are physically installed in your nervous system. You see, success is not a mystery, it's biology. You don't fail because you're unlucky. You fail because you never stayed in the struggle long enough for the rewiring to complete. Most of you are one stage away from your breakthrough, but you keep quitting at the threshold. You're standing inches from transformation, and you walk away because it's too hard. That's the tragedy of potential. It dies not from lack of ability, but from lack of endurance. Think about a butterfly struggling out of a cocoon. If you help it, if you tear the cocoon open for it, it dies. Because that struggle is what forces blood into its wings. The fight is what gives it flight. You can't skip the hard part. It is the process. And let me tell you, that's not just a metaphor, it's neuroscience. When you face adversity, your brain releases a molecule called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. It's like Miracle-Gro for neurons. It repairs brain cells, strengthens connections, and boosts learning capacity. But your brain only releases it under stress, meaning you literally get smarter through struggle. You become more capable through chaos. So the next time you say, "This is too hard," remind yourself, this is how my brain grows. When I tell people that, they look at me like I'm insane, but that's because they've been conditioned to associate effort with pain instead of power. That's the mindset you need to shift. You have to reframe discomfort as evidence of progress. Pain is not punishment. It's proof you're still in the fight. And the people who understand that, the ones who embrace it instead of avoiding it, those are the ones who build unshakable confidence. Because confidence isn't built by affirmations or positive talk. It's built by keeping promises to yourself under pressure. Every time you do something hard and refuse to quit, you tell your brain, "I can rely on me." That's how self-trust is formed. That's how real strength is born, not in calm, easy moments, but in chaos, in the middle of doubt. When every cell in your body wants to surrender and you say, "Not today." You know why I respect fighters, soldiers, and athletes? Because they understand this at a biological level. They've trained their minds to find clarity inside pain. They don't panic when it burns. They don't whine when it's uncomfortable. They've conditioned their nervous system to interpret adversity as feedback, not failure. That's why they excel. Not because they're stronger than you, but because they stayed longer in the fire. The same principle applies to every area of life. Relationships, careers, business, even mental health. You can't heal a wound you keep running from. You can't build resilience without resistance. The modern generation is drowning in ease. We have comfort at our fingertips, convenience in every direction, and yet we've never been more anxious, more depressed, more lost. Why? Because your brain was designed to grow through challenge. Without it, it starts to decay. Without purpose, the mind eats itself alive. Let's look at the science again. When you avoid hard things, your amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes overactive. It starts firing even at small challenges. You become hypersensitive to stress. But when you deliberately face what scares you, your prefrontal cortex strengthens its control over that fear response. It literally rewires the pathway. The fear doesn't disappear. You just learn how to dominate it. That's courage, not the absence of fear, but command over it. And this is the truth most never realize. Your nervous system adapts faster than your excuses. You think it takes years to change, but the human brain can begin reorganizing itself in days if the input is intense enough. That means every day you push through, you're not just surviving, you're programming. Every rep, every hour of focus, every moment you say, I'll do it anyway, it's writing new code. You're training your biology to obey your vision instead of your comfort. But here's the paradox. The beginning always feels like failure. The first few weeks at the gym, your body hurts. The first few attempts at a business, you lose money. The first few conversations in a new skill, you sound stupid. That's the cost of entry. The system is designed that way to filter out the weak. Nature weeds out pretenders by putting pain at the gate. That's why the few who endure become unstoppable. They've proven to the universe and to themselves that they can carry weight most people drop. I once met a man who had trained as a Navy diver. He told me something unforgettable. He said, the hardest part wasn't learning to breathe underwater. It was learning to stay calm when every instinct told me I was dying. That's it. That's life. Success, leadership, love, mastery. It all comes down to your ability to stay composed when your mind screams chaos. You can't control what hits you, but you can control your response. That's the difference between breaking and building under pressure. The moment you start seeing struggle as your gym, your mental training ground, everything changes. You stop fearing hard times because you realize they're not happening to you. They're happening for you. They're building neural strength, emotional armor, and psychological resilience. Every setback is a rep. Every failure is feedback. Every challenge is data for your brain to grow. But most people don't last long enough to see the pattern. They quit during the calibration phase, the part where the old identity dies and the new one hasn't fully formed yet. That's the void, the gap, the dark tunnel where everything in you wants to run back to safety. You'll say things like, it's not working. I don't feel like myself. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. But you are. You're just shedding the old version of you. And shedding always feels like loss before it feels like liberation. There's a concept in neuroscience called homeostasis. It's your brain's natural desire to keep everything the same. When you start changing, it panics. It floods you with resistance, self-doubt, fatigue, procrastination, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're disrupting the balance. Your old self is fighting for survival. But if you persist long enough, your brain recalibrates. It forms a new baseline, a higher standard. That's growth. That's evolution. Let me tell you something from my own experience. Every breakthrough I've ever had, mental, financial, emotional, came right after a period of absolute chaos. The kind of pain that makes you question everything. The kind of exhaustion that makes you wonder if it's even worth it. But every single time I refused to quit, something incredible happened. The world didn't get easier. I got clearer. The noise faded. The path sharpened. That's the magic nobody talks about. Clarity is earned through chaos. We live in a world obsessed with results. Everyone wants the outcome, but nobody wants the process. They want confidence without humiliation, wisdom without failure, success without sacrifice. But life doesn't work that way. The universe tests your seriousness through struggle. It asks, how bad do you want it? And it waits to see if you'll keep moving when nothing's working. That's how it separates talkers from doers. I want you to remember this: motivation fades, biology endures. If you want real change, don't chase hype, build habit. Because habits live in your nervous system. They don't care if you're tired or inspired. They execute whether you feel like it or not. And the only way to install them is through relentless repetition under pressure. You've got to fall in love with the grind. You've got to look at resistance and say, good, I'm right where I need to be. Think of the greats. Edison failed over 1,000 times before creating a working light bulb. Do you think he didn't feel frustration? He just didn't interpret it as a reason to stop. He understood that each failure was data. Each setback was refinement. He wasn't failing, he was iterating. That's the difference between amateurs and professionals. Amateurs quit when it's hard. Professionals keep going until it's done. And this mindset, this ability to push through, it's not just about success, it's about identity. When you learn to endure, you stop being fragile. You stop needing everything to go your way. You stop looking for easy paths because you realize the hard path is the path. It's the one that transforms you into who you were meant to become. Let me tell you a story about brain training. There was a study done on London taxi drivers. They have to memorize every street, every route, thousands of locations by heart. Researchers found that their hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for memory and navigation, was physically larger than average. That's what effort does. It reshapes your brain. They literally grew their minds through struggle. That's the lesson. The hard part is where your brain is upgrading. Every time you feel lost, confused, uncomfortable, that's your mind growing new connections. That's why it's hard. And that's why most people quit. Because they mistake growth for pain and pain for a sign of failure. But it's the opposite. Growth is pain, and pain is progress. So what's the mindset shift you need? Simple. Stop asking, when will this get easier? Start asking, how can I get stronger? Because that's the only question that matters. Life doesn't get easier. You just become more capable of handling it. The world doesn't soften for you. You harden for the world in the best, most powerful sense of that word. And this shift from avoidance to acceptance, from comfort to challenge, it's the foundation of every transformation. When you stop running from the hard and start running toward it, everything changes. You become unstoppable because nothing surprises you anymore. Discomfort becomes your teacher. Setbacks become fuel. Failure becomes information. Listen to me carefully. You can't outthink your way to greatness. You have to outlast your weakness. You have to train your mind to stay in the game longer than the average person. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Not once, not occasionally, but daily. Because the world rewards consistency, not intensity. It's not about how hard you hit once. It's about how long you can keep swinging. Most people will never know what they're capable of because they never stay in the fight long enough to find out. They quit when it's 40% done. That's when the magic begins. That's when your body starts to adapt, your brain begins to rewire, your identity begins to shift. That's when everything changes. So when you hit that wall, when everything in you says, enough, that's when you go one more round. That's where the new version of you begins. And if you keep doing that long enough, if you keep showing up when it's hard, keep moving when it hurts, keep believing when it's dark, one day, you'll wake up and realize the struggle that once broke you is now your baseline. The mountain that once terrified you is now beneath your feet, and you'll smile. Not because it got easier, but because you did. That's the ultimate reward. Not success, not money, not fame, but becoming the kind of person who doesn't quit when it's hard. Because when you master that, there's nothing left to fear. So the next time it hurts, the next time it feels impossible, the next time you want to give up, remember it's supposed to be hard at first. That's the point. That's the filter. That's the fire. Stay in it long enough, and it will forge you into something unrecognizable. Stay in it long enough, and the pain becomes purpose. Stay in it long enough, and your brain, your entire identity transforms. And when it does, you'll look back at this moment, the one that felt unbearable, and you'll realize that's where you were born. That's where the real story began. That's where everything changed, because it was hard at first. And that's exactly why you didn't quit.